Greetings everyone. Welcome to Narayana IAS. Today we are going to see the daily news analysis from the topics that have been picked from the Hindu as well as the Indian Express. Let us see the topics that have been chosen for analysis. From the first article is on the loss and damage funds. The name itself suggests it is a fund to compensate for the losses and damages, and it is with respect to the environmental damages. And we are going to also look into the UNFCCC under this topic as well. It is from the Hindu, page number 10. The next is the Taiwan and Malacca blockade and India's options. It's a very interesting article trying to show how the international geopolitics influence the relationship between various countries and how the coalitions between the countries form so as to pursue a common agenda. It is from the Hindu, page number 8. Next up is 1 year of Project Cheetah. That is, the Project Cheetah has started in the year 2022. Now, 1 year of the project is done. Now, let us see the status of the project, where we are headed, and what is the reason for the glitches that we are witnessing in the recent years with respect to the implementation of the Project Cheetah. It is from the Indian Express, page number 16. The G7 appeals to humanitarian pauses is the next article that we are going to deal. Here we have exclusively focused on the countries of G7 and why G7 is one of the important groupings that have the influence on the geopolitics, geoeconomics and other issues that the world faces. It is from the Hindu, page number 12. The next up is possible answers to farm fires. New rice variety can replace Pusa 44. This article is important from the preliminary point of view. That is preliminary examination. Pusa 44 is one of the important rice, yet we need to replace the rice. We are going to see the reasons and what is the replacement of Pusa 44. It is from the Indian Express, page number 1. Now, let us see our first article. Coming to the first article, it is on loss and damage fund. As the name itself suggests, the fund to overcome these losses and damages. We have many climate tackling funds. We have many funds to tackle the climatological issues. One such is loss and damage funds. In this article, we are going to see whether the loss and damage fund mechanism that we have created is functioning as per the expected lines or not, and why it is failing, and how the failure of it could have a wider implications upon the environment as well as society that we need to comprehend. So the topic goes by the title, Importance of Loss and Damage Funds. Okay, and the relevance is outcomes of COP meetings because they are part of the UNFCCC COP meeting, and how the present situation has reached, and how the present situation is to be assessed. Next, UNFCCC obviously, and Adaptation Fund, Loss and Damage Fund. It is one of the adaptation fund mechanism as well. UPSC syllabus, GS paper 3, environmental challenge. Okay, many questions are asked in UPSC on climate change. One such is the 26th session of the Conference of Parties. So you have to be aware of the outcomes of the Conference of the Parties as well. Now let us look into the article. The context is with regards to the loss and damage funds, and the 5th meeting of Transitional Committee has been organized recently, and the outcome of it is what we are going to deal in it, whether it is functioning on the expected line as we have already seen. So the problem is with the clash between developed and developing countries. So again and again what happens is the developed countries are the reasons for the present status of climate that is historically responsible. They have polluted the climate because they are the ones who have experienced the development in the past, the industrialization, clearance of the forests, etc. We have entered the race only after we have attained independence, because till then we are under the rule of the colonial regimes, which are the European as well as the North American countries. That is America. Okay, so we are trying to be on our own, but the climate has been polluted to such an extent that the climate change is a reality. Close to 1 degree Celsius of the rise in temperatures when compared to the pre-industrial levels could be attributed to these developed countries. Now the clash is between developed and developing. Developed don't want to commit more funds, developing want more and more funds. That is the challenge that we are facing. And even in the transitional committee meetings, that is what the final outcome is. They are going to see in this article. So the climate disasters are actually intensifying. How? We'll see how. The thing is that the heat waves in the Europe and the northwestern parts of the US are an indication, because heat waves are generally not seen in these parts. Of course, they are seen in the past, but now the intensification is higher, the heat waves are far longer, the temperatures are far higher. Next, the hurricanes in the New York, New Jersey, etc., the typhoons in the Japan, the floods in Europe, wildfire in California. You could literally see the images of the wildfires, the way they are raging and destroying the houses, plants, etc., whatever comes in their way. All could be attributed to the rising temperatures due to the climate change that we are experiencing. At the same time, the losses that we are incurring, close to $925.6 billion of losses, and it is as per the Reuters report. And the lives lost are 10,139 individuals. So, in the past decade itself, this is the extent of losses that we have witnessed. So this itself is an indication of the crisis reaching to such a level. The economic loss is not the only loss that we are experiencing. We are also seeing the degradation of ecosystems crumbling. The size of the ecosystem is getting lessened, and the quality of the ecosystem is deteriorating because of the human interference. There's still deforestation, the Amazon basin, or the forests in the African countries. They are witnessing declination in their area as well as the quality. Why? Because our ultimate economic development is in clash with the environmental protection. And at the same time, the cultural heritage is also taking a hit. Why? Because culture of us is not only linked with the people that surround us, but also the habitat, the place we are living in. For example, the tribal areas. Tribals consider the groups to be sacred. Once the place loses its liveliness, the culture is also going to get deteriorated, because the culture evolved from that particular region, and the climate is one of the defining factor of how the culture is evolved or celebrated. So the implications are far higher than expected. So the need of the hour is quickly quickly set up mechanisms to see that we could tackle this challenge. The strategies: firstly, adaptation measure. Okay, we have to pursue adaptation measure. Adaptation means we have to change our way of lives so that we could cope with the existing challenges that are witnessing, existing challenges that we are witnessing. For example, rising temperatures. Not only that, the precipitational differences. We are seeing variance in rainfalls. So everything is changing. And we have been habituated to live in a particular way because we are living in that particular way. But now we are seeing the changes in the environment, so we have to change as per the environment. Next up is the loss and damages. Okay, we have to also set up mechanism to overcome the loss and damages. Loss and damages are nothing but something which is not recoverable. The hurricane will strike us, and that will lead to death and destructions. Properties are lost. So these are the losses that we are incurring, and that is happening as we speak. So we have to compensate for the loss and damages experienced by the countries which are not contributing to the climate change to the expected or to the levels worthy of punishing, yet they are bearing the brunt. So we have to put mechanisms to compensate for their loss. Now, what is this loss and damage mechanism? It is an accepted institutional mechanism which was established under the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change. The climate change negotiations are undertaken under this framework, that is UNFCCC. And it is a financial mechanism as well as technical support to be given to the developing nations so as to see that the losses that they are incurring on account of these environmental wraths or environmental change related disasters, thus compensating to the losses. Next, about the materialization of the L&D funds, how it evolved over years. Firstly, the idea was put forward in the COP19, which happened in Warsaw in 2013, where the countries have formally agreed to establish a mechanism to compensate for the losses. Next up is COP25 Madrid. It is Santiago Network for L&D. Here, the countries were not willing to commit, especially the developed countries are now not willing to take the responsibility to actually commit to their need. to actually commit to changing the present conditions or to compensate to the losses. And even in the COP26, Glasgow Dialogue 2021, the finances with respect to how to mobilize these finances, how to use these finances are not finalized. And in COP27, what happened is the countries have agreed to establish a transitional committee. This transitional committee is going to decide how to mobilize finances, how to distribute the finances, how to calculate the manner in which the countries are to be compensated for the losses and damages that they are experiencing. But we are far from it now. Let us look into the transitional committee. Its role, as we already said, is to figure out the way to mobilize finances and distribute it. The outcomes, see, we have completed 5 rounds of discussions in the transitional committee. Still, it is not finalized. We are still in the process of coming to a outcome which is consensual to all members, that is developed and developing. But we are yet to see that there is consensus among the countries. Okay, that is operationalization of L&D. How it has to be done is not finalized yet. The main problems are, the problematic areas, the glitches are committing through which we could mobilize the funds as well as distribute the funds. This has not yet taken place. Many developing nations are against this idea because they believe that the World Bank is mostly controlled by the developed countries. Firstly, they are suspicious whether developed countries are committing to this fund or not. On the other hand, the bank which is going to undertake the transactions is also suspicious amongst them. So it is better to find alternative mechanisms. Okay, but temporarily Transitional Committee has accepted World Bank as a medium through which transactions are to be carried out. And the other important thing is that the developed countries are no longer willing to consider the important principles under which we have carried out negotiations. The common but differentiated responsibility mechanism, equity, etc. These are the ideals under which we have been able to successfully negotiate under the banner of UNFCCC. But now we are losing ground because developed countries are no longer willing, because of the extent of funding they need to contribute, to actually commit to improve the environment. Now the Transitional Committee, what happened in the Transitional Committee? The proposal is usage of World Bank as a mechanism, as an intermediary, and new dedicated and independent secretariat within the World Bank. Okay. See, of course, developing countries are not willing to commit to World Bank as a medium through which this implementation could be carried out, but yet we have given a leeway of 4 years to see that World Bank will take the course from now, but later on we'll think about the mechanism through which it could be actually established. The challenge, World Bank is yet to confirm whether it is willing to do it or not. The proposal is with regards to the donors. See, the donors are nothing but the developed countries. Okay, but yet recognizing a particular developed country and the extent to which it is willing to contribute is still not fixed. For example, if we say that the United States is one of the donor country and it has to contribute close to say $100 billion per year. So this is how we could expect the extent of mobilization that we could carry out. But that is not fixed. Why it is not fixed? Because the countries are not willing. That is a proposal, but yet many countries are unwilling. One such is United States. United States is unwilling to be recognized as a donor, and the extent of funding it is willing to contribute. Now we are dependent upon the voluntary efforts taken by the United States rather than the expecting lines that we actually expect from these countries. See, current draft simply urges and invites developed nations to contribute, but it does not give a clear timeline or the extent of financing it has to do. Next is the cooperative spirit is missing in it. Okay, the developed and developing countries are fighting amongst themselves. There is a lack of commitment, as we already seen, and the discontentment is clearly palpable between the developed and developing, as we have seen certain important principles that have been compromised by the developed nation. Next, implications of the outcome are far-reaching. The social implications, the vulnerable communities, especially the poorer countries and the poorer among the developed as well as developing nations, they are the ones who are facing the most brunt. They are the ones who are the least polluters, but They are the ones who are facing the actual and real problems that we need to take care of. Next, the number of humanitarian crises, catastrophes, disasters are on the rise. At the same time, vulnerable communities are now left to fend for themselves, to individually cope up with the damages rather than society compensating for the losses that they are incurring because of the society. Okay. Next is economic implications. The absence of support has economic consequences. Why? Because presently we are living in a globalized world. If one particular region of the earth is impacted, you cannot expect that the rest is protected and it is isolated. It is not the case. We are living in a globalized world where the economic implications in one part of the world impacts the entire economy. So even in terms of economy, this way is not profitable, not desirable. We have to see that the vulnerable communities also contribute to our economic growth. Thus, we have to take care of the damages that they are facing and thus recover their damages and see that they too thrive, and then the entire world will prosper. One thing we should also remember is the societal crisis. Okay, and what is this crisis? The possibility that the shortage of food or the disasters which have implications in certain regions will have a spillover effect. Why? Because the people who bear this brunt will try to migrate to other regions, and thus this spillover effect will impact the neighboring countries as well. So tackling these damages is important. Commitment is important. So this completes the article. Let us look into the next article. Coming to the next article, it is an interesting piece about how the blockade of Malacca Strait by India to counter China could finally lead to particular consequences and how to overcome these consequences. And why to blockade Malacca Strait in the first place? Okay. This is just an imaginary scenario created by the author, but yet it gives an interesting insight about how to deal with a situation where we need to confront China. As you know, China is our competitor and its size in terms of economy, military is far greater when compared to India. Yet we have certain geopolitical strategies that we could employ to actually counter China. Article is Taiwan a Malacca blockade and India's option. We'll try to go beyond what article presents and try to assess how other implications could also be factored to assess the situation that exists at the ground. The relevance of the topic is India-China relations, China-Taiwan relations and Strait of Malacca, the UPSC syllabus, GS paper 2 and India P5 relations. Okay. Now let us look into the topic. The context, the recent flare-up between China and USA over Taiwan. See, Taiwan has been a contentious issue. China claims Taiwan as its part, that is, China and Taiwan are one such whole, which it calls as one China policy. But though US accepts one China policy, it is meddling with the China by trying to build close relationship with the Taiwan. Okay, US and Taiwan are building their ties. And it is and we fear that in the future, in the near future, there is a possibility of escalation of conflict between China and Taiwan. Finally, China trying to occupy the Taiwan and make it a part of China. Because presently, Taiwan is autonomous and it is running its own affairs. And how India can respond, especially in the Strait of Malacca. How can India use Strait of Malacca as a choking point to counter China is what we are going to see. Now, the choke points and their strategic importance. Why the strategic importance? The strategic importance is because China uses the Strait of Malacca for carrying out its trade activities. So trade activities are carried out. Even for movement of this military or let's say navy, for collection of intelligence, for traversing into the waters of Indian Ocean, to have a watch over India's activities, at the same time guard the coast of Africa. Why? Because here there is a problem of pirates. But ultimately the thing is that the Strait of Malacca is in control of India. Why? Because we have the Andaman and Nicobar. The trade is important. Why? Because economy of China rests on the trade through the sea for carrying out various goods like oil, etc., or shipments goods, the goods that are manufactured in China to rest of the countries. So the disruption of the strait is obviously a choking point to China. Why it is called China's Malacca's dilemma? Because of its energy and trade activities, right? It ships energy related goods like petrol or coal, and then the supply chain to blockades or disruptions. Why? Because supply chain is with respect to goods and services. As you know, China depends upon exports for boosting its economic prosperity and mitigate the Malacca dilemma. How to mitigate the Malacca dilemma? China is trying to pursue various ways, but it takes time to actually see that these could be operational. But presently, we are in the hold of these Malacca, and thus we could capitalize on it. Yet there are certain issues as well. China could use the alternative routes that are presented here, that is the Sunda and Lombok Strait. At the same time, the detour via Lombok if Malacca and Sunda closed. Okay, if these are closed, it could use these routes as well. But we cannot simply go and unilaterally use that choke point, because that choke point is also used by the other countries. As you could see, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, etc., are also present in that region. If we use the choke point for our military purposes, there is a possibility that they too could raise their voices. So let us see the issues that may arise if we use the choke points for our own gains. So the legal and diplomatic challenges might arise, right? Legal, why? Because the international law doesn't permit India to close that choking point. Diplomatic, why? Because other countries might raise their voices. And then is the regional stability. How could you maintain regional stability? Right? The regional, why? Because we are concerned about our neighbors who are in our littoral borders, who are in the littoral region. That is the countries that are surrounding these oceans. So they could raise the alarm. In the technical complexity, do we have the capability to block the military passages of the Malacca? Why? Because through these Malacca, even the goods and service carriers, that is the commercial vehicles, are also traveling. So how to differentiate between these commercial vessels as well as military vessels or military vehicles? Next, China's extensive strategic petroleum reserves. That is, it has strategic petroleum reserves where it could use it to sustain its economy when this Malacca Strait is blocked. Then the risk of escalation and the potential of direct conflict with China. Why? Because when we blockade a passage, it is nothing but we are declaring war on China, and history has shown whenever a country tries to blockade another country, it will lead to escalation of conflict, leading to a war which has tragic consequences. Now, India's response to US-China conflict in the Strait of Malacca, what it should be if there is a possibility of China and India venturing into troubled waters. India and China venturing into troubled waters. Blue water navy. India has to strengthen its navy. Its naval potential has to be boosted. Nuclear deterrence should be strengthened, because now we are very less compared to China. We have to improve our deterrence capabilities by building up more weapons, nuclear weapons. Infrastructure development so that Indian economy could be resilient and earn more and more money, become prosperous, and compete with China in terms of its ability to invest in defense or its security detail, and strong military capabilities are to be strengthened. So, what is the way forward? The way forward is firstly de-escalate the tensions. Okay, so dialogue process is important rather than confrontation. We cannot expect everything to or every conflict to be settled through the use of warfare. We need to use dialogue. We need to see that both China and India could establish a win-win situation. Both could prosper rather than compete against one another, compete with one another. Next, we have to collaborate with the like-minded countries so that the coalition or our allies together could checkmate China. Or our allies could checkmate China. Like for example, we have US, Australia, Japan, who has similar interests and they worry about the rising and resurgent China. Then is forging multilateral cooperation at the international level. More and more countries collaborating with one another so that rule of law could be established. Because presently China is aggressive. It should be tamed so that it accepts rules which are acceptable by everyone rather than be overconfident, belligerent, and suppress other countries. So now let us look at the next article. Coming to the next article on the Project Cheetah. It has been 1 year since we have initiated this project. The project is important to us. Why? Because we want to see that the numbers of the cheetah rise in India. As of now, cheetah is an extinct species in India. There was a time when cheetah thrived, but the cheetah was the Asiatic cheetah. Now we are trying to introduce African cheetah. In this article, we are going to see whether the project cheetah is successful or not and the reasons why the success hasn't been on the expected lines. Okay? So the title is 1 year of Project Cheetah. Okay? The relevance is Project Cheetah and Kuno National Park. These are mostly important for preliminary examination and it is covered under the syllabus General Issues on Environment, Ecology, Biodiversity. Now let us look into the article. The context. Now let us look into the animal, that is the cheetah. Cheetah is the oldest of the big cats. What we have to know about cheetah is mostly the difference between African and Asian cheetah. The numbers vary. The African cheetah is better conserved when compared to Asian cheetah. Asian cheetah is presently found only in Iran. Earlier, they were found even in India. Okay? And the conservation status is different. Don't get confused here. Asiatic cheetah is critically endangered, whereas African cheetah is vulnerable. Okay? So African cheetah is vulnerable. Asiatic is critically endangered. And cheetahs have lost 90% of their global habitat. That is reasons for the declining numbers of the cheetah. And presently, we need more and more efforts to conserve them. Okay? And there is one difference between African and Asiatic cheetah. You might think that African cheetahs are far more superior in terms of their physical strength and their speed. But in reality, it is the Asiatic cheetah which beats the African cheetah. Keep that in mind as well. Now, let us look into the plan, the project that we have initiated in the last year. Project Cheetah. Cheetah Reintroduction Project, Project Cheetah. Now let us look into the project. It has been started in the year 2022, as I said last year. The main purpose is to revive the numbers of the cheetah. So, we have declared it as extinct in the year 1952, and before 1952, they thrived in India because we have some similar climatic conditions that enabled the rise of the population of the cheetahs as well. What we've done under the Project Cheetah is we brought 20 African cheetahs from Africa. The two countries from where we have brought these cheetah are Namibia and South Africa. Please remember these names. These are important for preliminary point of view. Now, what is the case? Where we are trying to conserve them? In the Kuno National Park. We want to see that their numbers get increased in the Kuno National Park. We have chosen this spot from the Madhya Pradesh because of the view that there the conditions are quite similar to the conditions that they actually lived in Africa. So we have chosen this spot. Next, let us assess the Project Cheetah, how far it is successful and how far it is not. If you look into the numbers, they are not quite encouraging. We need more efforts. There are certain reasons for the failure that we are going to see later in the slides. Now let us look into the present status of the conservation. Out of the 20 cheetahs that we have introduced, 40% are lost, functionally lost. So we are trying as hard as we could. We are trying to find and adopt new strategies to actually improve their population. One interesting fact is 4 cubs were born to a particular cheetah. Okay. So we want to revive, we want to see that the numbers get proliferated and increased. So one encouraging fact is, or one encouraging thing that happened is, one of the cheetah has given birth to 4 cubs. The other problem here is, out of 4, 3 have died. And one, we are trying to raise that in captivity. We are trying to raise that in captivity. And then we have the aim to see that the Kunopalpur National Park becomes their home range. That is, they feel as if their home is Kunopalpur. We want to adapt these cheetahs such that they consider it as home and adapt to the climatic conditions and thrive there. But that is unlikely at the moment. Our ultimate aim is to make it home range, but it is unlikely as of now. Next, one encouraging fact also is it has led to tourism. Spurring of tourism, lands rates have risen, and thus the people who are living in the surrounding regions are witnessing a rise in their income levels. Okay, so it is nothing but promotion of ecotourism. Now let us look into the reasons why it hasn't been successful, or why the cheetahs are actually facing the problems. The seasonal variations. We might be of the view that African climate is mostly similar to Indian climate, but we cannot exactly replicate those climatological conditions or weather-related conditions. See, the region from which we have brought this cheetah is from southern hemisphere. Okay, so their bodies have been habituated to facing this climate rather than our climate. Okay, that is, we have summer monsoon in one particular season, in one particular month, they have their summer months in other particular month. So their body characteristics develops to suit those climatological conditions. That is one such reason. Why? Because we are seeing that during the summers, there is an extra layer of fat that is being built up in the bodies of this cheetah. But actually it is a summer season. Whereas in the southern hemisphere, it is a winter. So the summer-winter differences. This is one such reason where it has been found out that 2 of the cheetahs have died because of the infection related to the radio collar bone, infection related to the radio collar that we have worn them to track their whereabouts, but that has caused infection, and one of the reasons for infection is the fat that has generated under their skins to adapt to the cold conditions. But actually, during that period of time, India has summer. And one of the important reasons is the differences of the temperature. The humidity and intense heat wave has also been the reasons for the cause of death. And the other is maggot infestation that has also infested these animals, leading to the death of their cheetahs. The other thing is that we are not able to proliferate the animals, that is reproduction. One of the way through which we could see that the population is sustainable is reproduction, but that is not happening. Why it is not happening? Because of the lack of genetic diversity. And it has been seen that the cheetahs are selective in terms of breeding. They do not breed among their own. They try to see the variations. Somehow we do not exactly know the mechanism they adapt to indulge in breeding process, that is sexual intercourse among their population, leading to the reproduction of animals. So this lack of genetic diversity has been one of the reasons why we are not able to see the reproduction among these species as per the expected lines. Of course, one has been able to generate the cubs, but our numbers or our expectations were far higher. One of the reason is lack of genetic diversity. Now let us look into the Kuno National Park, which has been selected for implementing this project. You have to remember Vindhyan Hills name, and in the Madhya Pradesh, instead of remembering all the facts, remember those which you could remember. And area, it spans over 748 square kilometers. It is not that of importance. And the status change, initially it was a wildlife sanctuary. Later on, we have upgraded it to national park. You have to know the difference between wildlife sanctuary and national park. And it has been done in the year 2018. Next up is the river. Remember also the name of the river which traverses through this national park, that is Chambal River. And lastly, the flora and fauna. Just try to remember certain names, because he asks a species name and he wants us to predict where this species could be found. Okay? Jungle cat, Indian leopard, sloth bear, Indian wolf, striped hyena, golden jackal, Bengal fox, dhole, and it hosts around 120 bird species. So this is what you should remember. Of course, try to remember the way you could. So now let us look into the next article. The article is on G7 response in dealing with the Palestine crisis. As we already seen that the Israeli has attacked the Gaza Strip to eliminate Hamas, which it considers as the terrorist organization. But that has led to humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. So what is the response of G7 and what the G7 is all about is what we are going to see. This article mostly focuses on preliminary point of view. So the title is G7 meet appeals for humanitarian pause in Gaza. Okay, so that it wants to see that there is a pause in the ongoing conflict so that the humanitarian crisis could be resolved. Humanitarian crisis, why? Because there is death, destruction and shortage of essentials like food, water, etc. We are going to learn about the G7 and it is important for important international institutions, agencies and fora. Okay. Now let us look into the reason. It is with regards to the conflict that we are witnessing in the Gaza due to the war between Israel and Hamas. Okay, Hamas, which it considers as a terrorist organization. But that is leading to the humanitarian crisis. Now we need to resolve it. For that, the G7 has also issued a statement for immediate humanitarian pause. That is the context. Now let us study about what G7 is all about. G7, as the name itself suggests, is a group of 7 countries. The significance of G7 is nothing but it is a platform for discussion, but the discussion is among the influential countries. Thus, their opinions matters to solve international issues or to know the opinions of the developed part of the world, developed countries of the world. There are many developed countries, but these G7 countries are influential in terms of deciding how the world is moving in particular direction. Okay? It is a platform, nothing but like a forum where group of people sit together and engage in discussions so that an outcome could be established, so that an outcome could be formulated to resolve certain issues. Okay? So the topics that are under discussion among the G7 countries are generally economic governance, energy policies, health, gender, etc. and etc. Okay, it could be anything. Next up is what are the G7 member countries? You have to know every country that is a part of G7. Japan, United Kingdom, France, Italy, Germany and the United States, Canada. 1976 is nothing but the year when Canada has joined, where G6 has transformed to G7 because now the total countries are 7 in number. The meetings are generally held annually and from among the members of the G7, it doesn't have any written constitution. That is a framework within which a discussion is carried out, right? For example, our parliament debates within the constitution, the law of the land, the supreme law of the land. But it doesn't have any law or a framework or a set of rules through which a discussion is carried out. So generally the discussions are open-ended. For example, for undertaking climate negotiations, we have a framework, United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change. But that sort of framework is absent in G7. The reason why this has been mentioned here is, it is important to know whether there is a charter, whether there is a constitution, whether there is a framework within which a particular entity operates. Here, G7 is not operating as per any constitution or any framework. The presidency is among the countries of the G7 itself. Headquarters, it doesn't have a headquarters, it doesn't even have a staff or office, etc. So it generally operates as a platform like an informal forum. The G7 footprint, that is the contribution or the extent of contribution of the G7. It is close to 10% of the global population, 31% of the world's GDP. That is why its influence is higher, okay, because of the prosperity among the G7 countries. Now, the CO2 emissions is also an important aspect. Why? Because while dealing with any aspect at the international level, CO2 emissions form one of the prominent parameters to judge their contributions. The lesser the CO2 combination, the better it is. The history of G7, it was in the year 1973, the need for G7 or need for G6 came into existence. The 1973 oil crisis has prompted the response from the G7 or the G6 countries, because initially it was G6, to formulate any plan to overcome global crises that are of importance to these countries at the same time at the global level as well. Okay, generally issues are the reasons for initiation of measures or planning how to see that we could overcome those issues. It was in the year 1975 it was formally created, that is G6 was formally created in 1975 with the countries that you have to remember: France, Germany, Italy, UK, Japan and the US. If you look into it, Canada is not among the founders. But later on, in the year 1976, Canada has joined, thus it was renamed as G7, that you have to remember. But the G7 has also included another influential country, that is Russia. Now, it has formed a G8 in the year 1998, because Canada has also become a part of it. But it is left in the year 2014, when the Russia has annexed Crimea. That too, you need to remember. Okay, Crimea. Crimea was a part of Ukraine. Next up is non-enumerated member, that is one who is not a member among the G7, but it indulges generally in discussion with the G7, which is European Union. Now, the recent summits, Germany presided over it, that is the 48th G7 summit in the year 2022. The next summit will be in the Japan. As I already said, the summit is generally conducted from among the countries who are the members of the G7. The 48th G7 summit has a theme, progress towards an equal world. Generally, there is no need for you to remember the theme because it is not asked. But if you could remember, it's better. Next, the conclusion. G7 is an influential group. Next, the conclusion. G7 is an influential group of developed nations that play a significant role in addressing global challenges and shaping international cooperation. This you could use in conclusion while writing about the G7 in mains perspective answer. Now let us move on to the next topic. Coming to the next article, it is on Pusa 44. It is one of the rice varieties. As you know, there are many rice varieties. Pusa 44 is one of the rice variety. Why this is under discussion is because of the judgment given by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court is of the view that the usage of Pusa 44 for cultivation is actually leading to the problems in Delhi. How is Pusa 44 cultivation is the cause for the problems that are occurring in the Delhi is the point in contention. Now let us look into the article and then we'll try to make the analysis. The topic is new rice variety can replace Pusa 44. So we have a rice variety which could actually replace Pusa 44, but because presently Pusa 44 is one of the attractive rice variety that is being cultivated, especially in the state of Punjab. As you know, Punjab is surrounding Delhi, so whatever happens in Punjab could have an implication on Delhi. This is one such. The relevance is Pusa 44, Pusa 2090. So we are going to learn about these two rice models. In addition to it, we are going to see another rice model. The important reason for learning is obviously the prelims perspective. But to give it in context, the syllabus, science and technology. The context. Why it is being banned? Why Supreme Court want banning of cultivation of Pusa 44? See, the maturity period of Pusa 44 is greater. We are going to see the extent of period it requires to mature. Because it is greater, Punjab farmers or the other farmers who are cultivating this variety has lesser time to clear the field, right? Because they have to prepare the field for next season, right? They have to prepare it for the next season. To prepare it for next season, they burn the stubble. That is a reminder of the crop. Once the benefits from the crop is reaped, because it is taking more time, they use various ways to see that the field is cleared. For that purpose, they burn, and this burning is actually leading to pollution. And the geography of Delhi is such that all the pollution is somehow finds way to that region. And we have seen various reasons for the rise in pollution in Delhi. One of the reasons is the burning of the crops. So that is why Supreme Court wants the ban. Let us look into various rice varieties and the differences in terms of maturity periods and the extent of yields. Another reason why Pusa 44 is an attractive option is the extent of yield it produces. The yield is higher, so the farmers produce the crops which have higher yields. That is why naturally they have an inclination to cultivate Pusa 44. So Pusa 44 is a rice variety developed by Indian Agricultural Research Institute. This fact is important for the prelims. Next, Pusa 2090, it is one of the variety that could be used as an alternative to Pusa 44. Okay, so we could use Pusa 2090 as an alternative to Pusa 44. Thus, we could get the same yields Pusa 44, and that too at lesser maturity period. So that is an attractive option. That is what is being suggested as an alternative to Pusa 44. And PR 126 is other rice variety, but the attractiveness of PR 126 is lesser when compared to others, but the maturity period is lower. And the other thing is that the Pusa 2090 has been produced through the usage of both the varieties. So good from Pusa 44 and PR 126 are combined to produce Pusa 2090. Now let us look into the maturity period differences. Pusa 44 has a maturity period of 155 to 160, whereas Pusa 2090 maturity period is just 120 to 125 days. Similarly, PR 126 has maturity period to be 125 days, but the production levels are lower. If you look into it, the yield of Pusa 44 is 35 to 36, and Pusa 2090 has also similar yield, whereas yield of PR 126 is 30 to 32 quintals. Okay, so this is about the various rice varieties. These are important from preliminary perspectives. Now let us practice certain questions on the topics that we have already dealt with. The first question is on G7. We have already seen the number of countries that are part of G7 bloc, that is 7 in number, and we know that they are influential and prosperous. So those parameters could be attributed to the Western nations mostly. It is not that other countries are not prosperous enough, they too are prosperous. These are the countries which have become prosperous in the 1970s itself. So they are developed bloc. So that could be used as a tool to actually eliminate options. Okay. So we know that Japan is a part of it. Next, France and Germany. Whereas Iran is still a developing country. While European Union is a union. And about the European Union, it is another episode. Okay, so we could eliminate these two. Now we get the correct answer. So how many of the above countries are part? Only 3. Now let us look into another practice question. Which of the following is not the outcome of UNFCCC's Conference of Parties 27, which was held at Sharm el Sheikh, Egypt in 2022? For that, you need to have detailed knowledge, detailed facts about the outcomes of any particular conference of parties. It is important for preliminary perspective because it has happened recently. You should be aware of that. A 5-year work program was launched to promote climate technology solutions. This is true. Next is agreed to set up L&D fund and transitional committee. This we have seen in the article. This is true. And launched action on water adaptation and resilience initiative. This too is true. So the answer is none of the above because the question asked is not the outcome. All are the outcomes. So answer is D. Now let us look into another practice question. The terms PUSA 44, PUSA 2090 and PR 126 were recently seen in news. It pertains to, we have already seen, it is a rice variety. So it is a rice variety. So the answer is B, rice varieties. Now another practice question. Consider the following statements. It pertains to the cheetah project that we have already seen. India imported cheetah from Namibia and South Africa as part of its cheetah reintroduction project. So this is correct. Because we do not have any cheetahs, we are importing from other countries. Iran is not willing to export its cheetahs for conservation purpose. Iran has Asiatic cheetahs. They could have been much suitable for our climate, but yet Iran is not supporting it. IUCN status of Asiatic cheetah is extinct in wild. It is false. Why? Because Iran has them in the wild. Next, Kuno River is a tributary of Chambal River which flows through Kuno National Park. This is true. We have already seen that Chambal River traverses through this national park. Next, cheetah is listed in Appendix 1 of CITES list, which contains migratory species considered to be in danger of extinction. This too is true. The species which requires exclusive protection are generally placed in CITES, and that too Appendix 1. It will have higher order of protection. Given the magnificence of this species called cheetah, we could expect or we could guess that it is a part of Appendix 1. So choose the correct statements. The answer is 1, 3 and 4 because the second one is false. Next is mains practice question. Examine the significance and challenges in mobilizing climate finance. This is a simple question that you could answer by referring to the first articles that we have presented. Firstly, give an introduction on the climate finance. Okay, what is climate finance? So we have various ways to explain climate finance and the outcomes that we could expect from the climate finance. Okay, the outcomes are nothing but adaptation, mitigation, development of technology to see that the carbon footprint could be reduced, etc. and etc. Even the first article that we have introduced could be utilized to answer this question. Next, the body part for which we have to write the significance. You could write about the sustained efforts and the developing and less developed countries which are in need of the finance, and to ensure climate equity. Why? Because we are seeing disproportionate impact of the climate tragedies on the poor versus the rich. Next, adaptation measures to actually cope up with the changes and support for loss and damage happenings, that is, to compensate for the losses incurred by the countries on account of the climate disasters, and promote climate change related research because technology is one of the mechanisms through which we could actually overcome the consequences of the disasters. The challenges. What are the challenges? There is a lack of consensus, especially the developed and the developing, lack of trust, cooperativeness among the developed and developing, delay in setting the process. They're still in the process of discussion. We haven't yet completed a proper framework to actually implement the measures, inadequate commitment from developed nations. Okay, so this completes the today's session. Please like, share and subscribe to Narayana IAS and this channel. Thank you.